Welcome to Career Happy Hour. It's 3 o'clock Pacific time, Friday, and this is Career Happy Hour. I'm Andrew Beach. I'm an executive coach. I'm a teacher of self-education. I help professionals communicate value to find great opportunities faster, whether they're working or not. That's through a pragmatic process of branding, planning, and effective networking. And if that's you and you need that kind of support, you're welcome to reach out to me outside of this session. This is my opportunity to give back to the community that has been so helpful to me on LinkedIn Learning. I appreciate, or on LinkedIn, this platform is exceptionally good at connecting with people. Use it to your advantage. Absolutely. So if you can hear me, just let me know in the chat where you're joining from, or the comments section, whether you're on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, wherever you're joining from. Just let me know where you are joining from so that I can give you a shout out and feel connected to you, even though you may be across the world somewhere. So there's been a topic on my mind. I don't know if we'll have time to get to the news today, but certainly there's something on my mind, and that is the title of today's session, which is what do you do when you have a feeling that the recruiter is just flat working against you in the hiring process? That's something that's been on my mind this week with several of the folks that I coach, and some situations I personally have experienced in a hiring process here in the recent past. But in any event, if you would please, this is a community. This is a community that supports each other by making ourselves accessible through this platform called LinkedIn. I think that's the first thing to note, is that there are many people here just kind of passively watching or maybe catching the replay. That's perfectly fine. If you see people putting their LinkedIn profiles in here and they seem intriguing to you, I'd reach out to them directly. I also have in the description, regardless of which platform you're joining from, you can put your LinkedIn profile in there, and it'll get cross-pollinated in some capacity. But maybe I should turn on the let me see here, chat overlay. Oh, we'll turn this on. Let's give it a shot. Hey, I'll just say hello. Of course, I wish I could spell it properly. That's interesting. It shows me as the Restream moderator. Let's do it as let's do Andrew Beach from LinkedIn. Hello. Or from YouTube. I'll put my YouTube in there. There we go. Excellent. So if you want to come on live, you can. This is an opportunity for you to come in, ask me questions. I'll provide you some hands-on support right now. Literally, this is live coaching. And yeah, that is kind of scary, isn't it? Or at least we don't know what to expect, but you could click the link in the description that says join me live right now, and you'll have the opportunity to get your question answered. Now, the other side of that link isn't the fact that you come on live. I'll put you in the waiting room, right? There's what I call a green room there. And if you don't want your questions made public because maybe you're not actively in the marketplace, or if you are, you just don't want people to know about it, I get that. I would use the private chat on the back end of this Restream service and just say, hey, Andrew, I've got an anonymous question, and go ahead and put that anonymous question in the back end chat, private chat, and I will do my best to answer it. So that's that. Share your LinkedIn profile address. Click the link in the description if you want to come on and ask a question privately. And you can also certainly share this broadcast out with your networks. Part of the way that we grow any community is by sharing. So I share information, I share advice, I give you perspective. We talk about the news and how that's maybe impacting the marketplace, and how people are approaching the marketplace, and how some companies are maybe not as good at customer or candidate experience as others, and how to foster environments where all populations are having an exceptional experience. But again, if you have any questions, put those in the comments or the chat, whatever you want to call it, and then share this broadcast out with your networks. You could do that through private message if you don't want it public. That's fine. I get it. Share it in groups if you think that's appropriate, and certainly getting a broader audience is helpful. So I'll turn off that chat overlay here so that we can just focus on the content today. So what's on my mind is this concept of what do you do? And I was just thinking through some things, and I'm sure you all would probably have some additional thoughts on this topic as well. but I think I wrote down, and it's a lot, 15 things. I have 15 items, and I'm sure I may come up with some more. Um, Sometimes, I show up to these things and I don't really have anything on my mind. So I share the news. Other times I come to this session on Friday and I have something to share. And so that's one of these days. I have something to share today. And that's when, you're going through a hiring process. You maybe, whether you've gotten there through an application or a referral or what have you, you're entering into the hiring process. And at some point during that hiring process, you kind of get the feeling that the recruiter is working against you. And it may be true, it may be false evidence appearing real, but you fear that somehow you maybe have stepped on some toes or what have you. You're just not quite sure, but you get that feeling. You ever been there? You get that feeling that the recruiter may be working against you. And so I have some thoughts there. A part of this certainly is your approach and how you're interacting with the recruiter, and looking in the mirror and perhaps doing some after action review or retrospectives on your interactions is important. So the first thing I wrote down is this concept of, just because they're a recruiter doesn't mean they aren't critical to the hiring process. In fact, they are. Often they will recommend certain candidates that they pre-screen to the hiring manager. What does that mean? That means in a lot of ways, I need to treat this person just like I would as if they were the hiring manager. And therefore, you don't control the hiring process. And that's a stark realization for a lot of us, especially if we come from situations where we're in control of, say, a project or a budget or a team. This process we don't control, and that can be rather frustrating. And so the objective here isn't to get hired with a recruiter, it's to get to the next round. Okay. So anytime you're with a recruiter, especially if it's initially in the early times of your hiring process, your job really is just get to the next round. And that's really what we're talking about here. Just get to the next round. It's that simple. And then the second concept is kind of related to that. And that is, hey, even though I'm talking to a recruiter, they probably have 2 or 3 things in the back of their mind that they know for sure the hiring manager is looking for in the candidate that they want to interview. And even though you've read the job description and you have maybe 15 or 20 things listed there that you in varying degrees could do, it's important to know that the examples you share and the things that you talk about are identified up front before you share them, because you may be sharing things from your past or your expertise or what have you that are not the top 2 or 3 things that they're really interested in having. So just assume for a moment that the recruiter is asking you to an interview because they believe, to a certain extent, you have the capabilities, the skills to actually do the job. And that's something to remember. Hey, they feel at some level, I can do this job. Now, in the interaction I have with that person, is I need to identify as early on in the interview process, the hiring process as possible, what are the 1, 2, 3 most important things in terms of experiences, accomplishments, tasks, role, whatever that looks like, that this recruiter is looking for to make a decision on pushing you forward in the hiring process. And even if they push you forward in the hiring process, doesn't mean that they had a good handle on what those 2 or 3 things were. It could be that there was a preferred candidate. That happens all the time. Maybe there was a hire from within, and we're just rounding out our compliance, right? So compliance certainly plays a role. It's not primary, but it certainly is a role in the process. So that's the second thing, is find out what's most important as early on in the process as possible. The third thing, and I know I got 15 and I'll probably add some extras, but the third thing I have here is be prepared for the usual questions. And so the challenge that I have here a lot of times with candidates that I coach is that it's like, I'm afraid of these questions. So I'm just, I'm going to skirt around them. I'm just not going to answer them. And so the common questions like salary requirements, or tell me about your background, or what are you doing most recently at XYZ company? I mean, these questions are coming. So the idea here is, if I imagine this recruiter, even though they're asking some of these questions that really just seem out of place for any hiring process, but they're coming anyway, is to confidently answer without contempt or arrogance. Because I often, what I find is, many of the candidates, people that I coach, leaders that I interact with, they are really qualified people. They have a lot of great experience, a lot of wisdom, and they know it. And the challenge that a lot of us have is not coming across as arrogant or condescending or with contempt when we're interacting with a recruiter, because that will reflect poorly on our capability to go forward in the process. And so just remember, treat the recruiter just like you would the hiring manager, your future boss, a colleague, a good friend, right? Not a good friend, but if you were to think about how would you want to be treated if you were a recruiter, walk a mile in their shoes. I can assure you, it's not an easy job. It's not an easy job for a lot of people. And they're impacted as much by the pandemic and the lack of talent and resources as every other group inside the organization. So give them a little grace and space to make mistakes, because everybody makes mistakes. People make mistakes. So that's the third thing. Be prepared for those usual questions and don't answer with contempt or arrogance. 4, follow up. Here's what I found is that often we interact with the recruiter. We feel like we did a good job, but there's maybe just that one question you didn't answer very well. And you're like, okay, I think they were looking for something differently there. So don't think just because the interview is over that collaboration, that correspondence, that engagement is over. It's not. You can certainly follow up with a recruiter just like you would a hiring manager, or even your, in any of your past circumstances. If you were interacting with your boss and you didn't give them exactly what they needed on the job, you can certainly follow up with them and say, I need to get more clear on this, or I don't believe I answered that as completely as I could have. Would it be okay if I give you some additional content, some additional insights, whatever that looks like? And so don't be afraid to communicate additional information to a recruiter, especially when it comes to perhaps gratitude. So that's something we'll talk about in a second. The fifth thing on this list, especially if you feel like this recruiter is working against you, it could be a devil of your own design. You're making your bed you've made your bed and you get to lie in it, kind of thing. And so often it just is occasionally a good opportunity to compliment the recruiter. Give thanks and gratitude for their time, for their capability, for their difficult job. Recognize their difficult job. Give them a compliment. Thank them for their time. If you feel like they did a great job, tell them so. Tell them they did a great job. I've interacted with a lot of recruiters, a lot of companies in my time, and I just want to tell you, you're doing a great job. And I'm not saying that just to brown nose, but I've interacted with a lot of companies and I really appreciate your approach and honesty. Thank you. And sometimes that'll be enough to push you on to the next round just because you were nice. And not that I'm suggesting you pander to people, but certainly if you feel truthfully that they did a good job, tell them so. I don't think there's no downside to that. So compliment, gratitude, thanks. Make that part of your interaction with any recruiter. Number 6, remember, you're one of many. And not that I'm here to diminish your experience in the hiring process, nor is the recruiter. They want you to have a good experience because guess what? That means that you're going to bring other quality talent into the organization because you had a great experience. It's not much different than if you were a customer of an organization. So keep that in mind. But the idea here is that you're one of many. Therefore, at the mindset that I have to maintain is that I may not move forward. So, if you look at the data, it's typically somewhere in the neighborhood 200-300 applicants, many of whom are not qualified just because of whatever reason they have requirements to, meet for unemployment benefits or what have you. So there's certainly people that are unqualified at the bottom, people overqualified at the top, and there's this group of people in the middle. And I would feel lucky. I'd count my lucky stars that I got an interview. Because there's nothing more important in a hiring process than the interview, bar none. For a candidate, there might be other things that are important for the company, the organization, or the hiring manager. For you in a hiring process, there's nothing more important than the interview. It's what's directly related to your capacity to get offers, to move forward in the hiring process, and to get leverage in negotiation. So the quality of your presentation and your qualifications and your substantiation of said qualifications is directly related to your capacity to negotiate. And so I'm not trying to put too much stake into the interview, but there's certainly a side of this that you control, and that's the preparation. So you control your preparation. You don't control the outcome always, but you do control your preparation. But being one of many, the objective here is to leave a positive impression, because they may have a preferred candidate. They may go forward with that candidate, and it may be that you don't fit. It's just the truth. You just know you're not going to bat 1,000. You're not going to hit 100%. You're not going to always succeed in your interviews. It's not the type of thing that you'll be absolutely exceptional at that all the time. So that means if I leave a positive impression, it could be that down the road, there's another opportunity that fits me better, maybe pays more money, has better scope of responsibility, and I end up ahead. And they remember me. Why? Because I made a positive impression. So there are things that happen during an interview process where the recruiter will take notes. They'll put those notes in some kind of system, and they will share their experience with the hiring manager. So just know that even though you don't have direct contact with the hiring manager, they hear how you treated that person. And that could make a huge difference in your capacity to have additional follow-on opportunities if this isn't the right time for you at that organization. And even then, let's say that recruiter, and this happens all the time. I've seen it. I've seen recruiters go from company to company, stay in the same area, and pull the talent that they've hired at other companies into this new company they're with. So if I have a good recruiter relationship and that person gets hired at one of my other target companies, and even though I didn't get hired at that other one, they may pull me into the new company. So keep that in mind. You want, not only is the hiring manager going to see, but this recruiter might end up somewhere else and they want to bring you along. So that's number 6. Number 7, stand for what you feel you're exceptional at. And I don't know if that's the wording I have, but each of us has superpowers, a set of skills and experiences and things that we feel we're really good at. And we all have capabilities. Don't mistake what I'm hearing here is that I'm not trying to fit every requirement that they have. If I try to fit every requirement they have, they're going to see it. They're going to say, oh, he's trying to pander, or, he's trying to check all the boxes on the requisition. And, once I start hearing that as a hiring team, I'm thinking this person's either lying or they're overqualified. And so we shouldn't think that by checking all the boxes, that means we're going to be hired. It could be that's actually disqualification. And that means of all the capabilities I have, what would you stand on as 1 or 2, maybe 3 things that you're exceptional in, and try to avoid being the fit for everything. Because here's the thing. If I feel this and I communicate this and they feel it, they're going to communicate that to the hiring manager and the hiring team. So what do you want them to transmit, translate, pass on to the hiring team? I think I'd want to have something that I want to be known for. And that certainly is part of this process, is you want to be known for something, even if you're not talking to the hiring team. That will get passed on. Okay. Now, let's say, and this is number 8, actually, even though the recruiter may not respond favorably, for whatever reason, they're moving forward with other candidates, you should respond favorably. You should thank them for their time. It's easy to get angry. They're a convenient target, and that's unfortunate because they're customer facing or candidate facing. They're insulating the hiring team from a lot of that negative emotion and feedback. So I would not advocate that you respond that way. It is a natural response to be angry or disappointed or sad. And then to try to say, well, why is that? Why did you make that decision? And, I've got that experience and I can do this job. And, you're trying to sell a no into a maybe. And that's not very flattering for you. It's not a lasting memory that I would want. So I'm not going to make any concerted efforts to talk them out of it. They've, in a lot of ways, they've already made their decision. And it's not always, how should I say it? It's, you don't always have to get in the last word. Getting in the last word may not work to your benefit. It might work against you. So don't feel like you have to get the last word in. What we do want is a lasting, positive, favorable memory of who we are, even if they don't choose us. And we're not going to make efforts to scuttle any future opportunities by trying to talk them out of their decision. There's many reasons they make decisions. And the other part of this is they may not tell you the truth about why they made that decision. So feedback is good, but it isn't always accurate. And we'll talk about that in a second. Number 9. Okay. When the recruiter doesn't respond, you notice I didn't say if the recruiter doesn't respond, but when the recruiter doesn't respond, because it's normal for recruiters not to respond. If you figure, 200, 300 applicants per requisition, 50, 60 requisitions, do the math. They just don't have time to respond to everybody. So don't take it personally, even though it is personal. I get it, that this recruiter has it out for you when truthfully they don't. They just don't have the bandwidth to respond to everybody. But here's what it does mean. It does mean a couple of things, potentially could mean a couple of things from the recruiter perspective. First, it could mean this role just isn't a priority for the organization. That's just a fact. Not every role is as important as another. And there is constant, struggle on prioritizing which roles are top priority for the organization, strategically speaking. And it's not good or bad or right or wrong, but it could be that the role that you're applying to just isn't, or the role you're interviewing for and being considered for just isn't strategic to the organization. It happens all the time. That's the first thing. The second thing it could be is that you're impatient. It just, again, you don't control the hiring process, and it means it's just going to take longer. Sometimes, companies just take 3, 4, 5 months to hire somebody. I know that that's terrible to think, but if it's a target company and you really want to work there, be patient. Just be patient. It's going to happen for you sooner or later. And if it doesn't, then just follow up favorably. And so follow up and being insistent on having communication is the objective here. Is we don't want to call them every 15 minutes, send them an email 8 times a week, right? We don't want to be overdoing it, but we do want to follow up and keep ourselves top of mind, especially when they're not responding as promptly as we would wish. So that's number 9. Number 10, don't stop looking for other roles. Okay. Even though it feels like this recruiter is working against you, it may not be the case. It just may be they have a preferred candidate. They're going a different direction. It's just not productive to wallow on why you're not being selected. What is helpful is the follow-up. You control that part, and looking for other opportunities. So if you aren't getting the feedback or the response or the agile nature of things with this organization you're in a hiring process with, go find another opportunity. That's a productive way to manage the feelings and the emotions that you might be experiencing when you're going through that. There may be just a bunch of other roles out there that fit you better. And even though you may want to work there, it may not work out for you, nor is it as pretty on the inside as you might imagine. So keep that in mind. So that's number 10. Number 11, follow up after the position is closed. So even if they close the position and there isn't a positive outcome for you, I think you'd be surprised. I think you'd be surprised how often companies don't hire anyone. They go through and nobody meets their needs. They have to readjust and repost that position with different requirements. That's just a fact. The good news is you had influence on that, and they may actually tailor the position to meet your skill sets a little bit better. That's all it means. So that's the first thing to think, is that it could be they don't hire anybody because they don't know the requirements are really what they want, and they'll reposition that and repost it. So that's why you want to follow up to see how you can influence what gets on the posting, making sure that you're notified of that posting and being considered for that new role that they've just created. The second thing to consider in terms of follow-up is that not everybody works out. Many companies have a 30, 60, 90-day some kind of probationary period. And it might be that person they look good on paper, they interviewed well, but they didn't perform. It happens. And so hiring teams make mistakes. Let's just be honest about it. As much as they try to mitigate that fact, it does happen. It does happen. So please always follow up the recruiter. Even if you had a bad experience or you feel like they're working against you, follow up with them anyway. Because it could be that now that they've staffed that role and it's closed, guess what? they misjudged the volume of work that's there and they need a second role filled. Guess who's on that list, that short list, if you had a positive experience and you followed up and you were top of mind? It could be, hey, we've already interviewed this person. Why don't we just open another role, slide them in? We'll open it up for 10 days on our Taleo website or our Workday website, to meet our compliance issues. And now I'm the preferred candidate just because what? I had a good impression and I followed up with that hiring team. So here's a thought. Maybe you could go back through the list of companies you interviewed with and just ping their recruiters. So if I interviewed, with 5 or 6 companies this year, I might just go back and hit the hiring manager, the recruiter, whoever I interacted with in those hiring processes, and just give them a thank you again. And, let them know still in the marketplace, they're still looking for things in this capacity and would like to make a difference. If you're open to it, I'd like to have a network conversation before the holidays. It would just be one of those things that you stay top of mind just by reaching out and following up. So go back through your list of those organizations you interviewed with or recruiters that you've interacted with, whether you wanted to go work there or not, to stay top of mind. That's 11. 12. I think it's important that when you ask for feedback, you do it a specific way. Okay. Because I don't want to affirm what I don't have. Let me say that again. I don't want to affirm in the hiring team's mind the reason I'm not qualified. What I do want to know is, how do they make a decision? How do they make a decision for a candidate? So instead of saying, hey, what could I do better? Or what do I need to change? Or what's wrong with me? Probably nothing wrong with you, by the way. It could be you just didn't present well. It could be you didn't share the right accomplishments. It could be you didn't do a good enough job in the interview. It could be a lot of reasons, but it has less to do with you and more to do with how they make decisions. It could be that you didn't confirm up front what is the top 2 or 3 things important to them. You shared a bunch of stuff that's irrelevant. And it could be that you are qualified and you feel compelled to talk them out of it, but I wouldn't do that. So here's how I might ask this question. And I wrote this down so I could get it right. Hey, could you give me a little insight on the decision-making process for the hiring team or the hiring manager, whoever made the decision not to move you forward in the process? Give me a little more insight. Well, there's a candidate that had X, Y, and Z, and then I'm following that up. Okay, so there's a candidate over here that has this kind of stuff. And I'm not going to say, oh, so you think I could do better in that space? No, I'm going to say, well, what do you, from your perspective, what did you see in me that I brought to this role that was strong? Right? So what am I leaving a lasting memory of to this hiring team, to this recruiter that I think is working against me? Oh, Andrew's good at this. Andrew's good at that. Andrew's got this, right? There's all of these things that I have that they're now affirming to me that I have. And that's super, super important. So keep that in mind. Work through that list of people and maybe ask them, how do they make decisions for or against you, so that you can affirm what it is you have. And now what happens when you leave that kind of lasting memory with a recruiter and they go down the path 30, 60, 90, 6 months later, and all of a sudden there's this opportunity available that matches what they thought you had that was really strong. Okay. And you followed up with them. Does that work? Yes, that works. So even though you feel like the recruiter is working against you, you actually left a lasting positive impression, and they're more likely to come back to you in the future for that. I'm getting down my list here. So again, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. Please, by all means, put those in the chat, in the comments box, wherever you're joining from. And if you do want to come on live, in the description, there is a link to come on live and get your questions answered, or to put an anonymous question in the green room and say, hey, Andrew, I have an anonymous question. There is a private chat in here on Restream. So you could certainly do that. Okay. 13, number 13, lucky number 13. The feedback may not be the truth. Let me say that again. The feedback might not be the truth about why they didn't move you forward in a hiring process. Why? Well, how could that be? Don't people want to be truthful? Yes. They also don't want to be sued for equal employment opportunity violations or what have you. So often the feedback you get is very surface level, very high level, and it's not very helpful. So just know that the feedback that you get in not being moved forward in a hiring process is bound by compliance. And even though they might want to give you that feedback, they may not. They may have a scripted response. They may be driven by corporate policy. And not that that's bad. I'm going to ask those questions I posited before. Hey, how did they make a decision to move forward with the other person or the other candidate? Or what was the decision-making process? What did that look like? What do you think I bring to the table that would be valuable to the organization? So I want to affirm myself, and I want them to affirm me so that they remember me. Okay. Because they'll know me for at least, at minimum, asking really good questions. So that's what I'm always out there to do, is ask good questions. So that's 13. And don't overlook that just because they had a preferred candidate, that you couldn't be that person too. You could be that person, preferred candidate. I like that position. I don't want to be the compliance candidate, right? The one that they put in there so that they can have a diverse slate of candidates, and then they hire the one they want anyway. I want to be the preferred candidate, the one that's known to the hiring team, where I have varying degrees of trust. And that's what I teach actually in my coaching programs and in my training programs, is how do I do that? How do I get to the back end and start building relationships now, so that when I get to 6 months, a year, 2 years, whatever, when I come to a crossroads in my career, by my choice or not, I am prepared, and I have relationships, and I'm a preferred candidate all at once. So that's something to do proactively to build those relationships. So here it is. That feedback may not be the truth. That's number 13. 14, always leave a door open for future opportunities, regardless of the outcome. Always leave the door open. It would be very easy to get angry, to yell, to scream, to write a 10-page email of all the reasons why they should hire you, and that certainly might be helpful in you processing your emotion in terms of rejection. I don't deny it, but it's not something that I would share with that hiring team. So I'm always leaving a door open. I'm always being positive. I'm always providing them something memorable about me that's good, because you never know. What you're doing is not much different than planting seeds. That's all. And so that seed may germinate and bear fruit in 3 days or 30 days or 3 years. You just don't know. But that seed has been planted, and let that be a positive seed for your success. So always leave that door open. That's number 14. I can't believe I have 15 things on this. Good. Oh, looks like we have somebody in the chat here. Let me see what Mark has to say. Thank you, Mark, by the way, for coming and for putting a question in here. I appreciate you. Makes my life a little bit easier. So don't be afraid, folks, to put your questions in here, because I'm going to do my best to help Mark answer his questions. So here's the question. What are your thoughts of reaching out via LinkedIn to the potential hiring manager and other potential team members to try to build some advocacy, i.e. if you feel that the recruiter might not see your resume? I think that's totally in bounds. And that's why LinkedIn exists in the first place, is so that you can have those kind of conversations. That's the first thing said. The second thing, and something that I would be a little bit leery of, is, am I reactive or am I proactive in this process? And so I'll give you a hypothetical. Let's say I see a job. It's at my number one company, Microsoft. I apply for it, and then I put in my resume, my cover letter. I put all that in, and now I go to the people I know or should know, and I try to build a relationship, asking them about a job. Well, that's tactical, and it's not bad. It just isn't as strategic as you want it to be. It's very tactical. And yes, you may get a job that way, but it may not work out the way that you want it to all the time. Strategic's a little better. If I do this activity that you just described proactively prior to an application resume, now I have an internal champion. I have an advocate. I have somebody I can put on as a referral. I often, because I have a referral, I'm going to get an interview. So just know that many companies will actually guarantee you at least a conversation with the recruiter if you're referred in. So keep that in mind. So I absolutely. So the one thing that I would take on as a mindset is that every company is hiring, whether they're advertising or not, is the question. What are they They just may not be advertising the role, but they are hiring. Just imagine for the moment, what would happen to an organization that stopped hiring? What would happen to an organization that stopped hiring? And then you'll certainly find your answer therein. So good. So thank you for that question, Mark. I do appreciate it. Hopefully that gave you a good answer. It might not have been the answer that you wanted, but often we come to a hiring team with our application resume hat in hand, and they just not that the recruiter is bad, but I want to build a relationship with somebody in an operation that's aligned with my skill sets, rather than a relationship with a recruiter who serves as often as a how would you call it, a gatekeeper. Not that that's right or wrong or good or bad, it just is. They're the gatekeeper to the hiring team, and they're going to do their best, for good reason, to insulate you from said hiring team. So just know, at that point, many companies also have a policy against networking or conversations once a hiring requisition is opened, and you may be disqualified from consideration if you push it too hard, and you're in the face of the hiring team that way. They might just push your resume to the bottom of the stack. So be cautious of that. 15, review, after action review, retrospective. Sometimes we don't move forward in a hiring process, and we're not okay with that, and we want to do better next time. I'm that way. I want to do better next time. So I need to review my performance. I need to look at my notes. I need to see, okay, when did I maybe say something that wasn't interpreted properly, and how can I prevent that from happening again? Maybe I need to have a handful of other examples that demonstrate the things they said I didn't have, and yet someone else moved forward because of that. So I need to come up with, or try to remember, some experiences, some accomplishments, some value that I provided my prior employers, that would be relevant to any future roles at that company or any other that I'm a part of. So don't look at it as failure. Look at it as learning. There's an opportunity to learn from what I did or how I approached it, and to make a better presentation next time. Because something may just be a little bit off. Maybe you're just off a little bit and you just need a minor adjustment. Maybe there was nothing off, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't try to do better next time. I certainly would, for sure. Better stories, better examples, more accomplishments, that sort of thing. Now, in the event that the recruiter is actually working against you, and they make you feel that way, sometimes that it's just an indicator of that company and their capacity to support their hiring teams. And maybe that person is dealing with something that is outside your control and relates to the corporate culture, and whether or not they value the talent acquisition function. And so you don't control that part, but give that person a little understanding and empathy that they may be in a tough position. And if that's the way it is, I wouldn't allow that one interaction to paint a broad stroke on any organization I anticipate working for. Now, if there's a track record, right? You interview 6 times with different teams inside that company and they all treated you the same way, then that's considered status quo. Then I would have maybe something to go on. But if you have one bad experience with one person, one recruiter, everybody has a bad day. Everybody should get a mulligan. I heard that said just the other day with one of my clients, is you only get one mulligan. Well, I don't know. Sometimes we often look at what we did wrong rather than what we did right, and what our contributions were versus what we could do differently next time. So focus in on those things you believe you did, applied, contributed, rather than those things you wish you could have, or you wish you did have. Because one of those will lead to, some dark places, and the others will lead to confidence. So that's what I'm looking for here. I'm looking to give you all some confidence. Good. So that's the end of it. That's the end of the remarks that I prepared. I told you some days I have a lot to say, and other days I don't. And so this is based on some experiences I had this week, and those of my clients had this week. So I wanted to make sure that I got that out to you, gave you some insights and that sort of thing. There's a lot of news that happened this week. I don't anticipate I'm going to share any of that today, but if you want to, please put your questions in the comments, the chat box, whatever you want to call that, and I'm happy to answer. And then if you got value out of this, I'd just like to see you thumbs up the video wherever you're joining from, and share it just with one person that you think might find value in it. I think that would make me feel good, and certainly bring Career Happy Hour into focus for other people who don't even know about it. So this happens every week, at least that I'm capable of. I know I missed a week because we were doing a college visit, but it was the only date available, and it came at a day and time that this happens. And I was going to, by the way, I was going to prepare a recorded video message, but LinkedIn actually discourages that. They want LinkedIn Lives to actually be live. They don't want LinkedIn Lives to be a recorded webinar or anything of that nature, even though you can do that through a lot of these streaming systems, including the one I have. I'm not going to do anything to diminish the terms of service. So keep that in mind. All right, I don't see any other questions here, so I will bid you adieu. Have a great weekend, and certainly we'll see you next Friday, 3:00 p.m. Pacific time, for the next episode of Career Happy Hour. Take care, everybody. Bye now.